Welcome in, whiskey freaks, to the Blind Tasting Podcast, Splash and Dash Edition. This is where I skip the history lessons, I avoid the deep dive, and I get right down to business, tasting and reviewing a bourbon or a rye or a single malt. You really never know what I got up my sleeve or what's got my attention at the moment. I don't know half the time either. Today I am stoked, and I've been dying to do this one for a good while now. I've got so many bottles here at the house. My wife's about to kill me. I just can't get to it all here on the pod as fast as I want. But I'm doing one I remember loving, and I don't know, will it be like I remember it? And full disclosure, I haven't had this one in over 5 years. Today, I'm reviewing Four Roses Small Batch Select Straight Bourbon Whiskey. And you know my goal, at least one of my intentions here on the podcast is to review stuff you can actually find and then actually afford. There's going to be no Weller Millennium here. In fact, I try not to do too many stupid things here. Things like that, to me, that's just foolishness. With money being tight right now, I appreciate you guys got to make informed decisions about what to drop your hard-earned cash on. Look, I've been burned too many times listening to those guys. You know, the ones that get the free samples from the distillery and they give it all thumbs up. And it turns out it's crap. Okay, sometimes it's not crap, but sometimes it ain't great. Well, I kind of feel a little misled. Here, you're gonna get the truth. My real, legit evaluation of all things whiskey, especially in my reviews. So without further ado, let's get after it. Now, like I said in the opening, I have had this one before. I bought the bottle. Actually, I ran to the liquor store the minute I heard it was out back in, I think it was 2019. Needless to say, I don't have that bottle anymore here at the house. So for the review today, I picked this one up just a few weeks ago. I'm really interested today to see if I remember it the same way that I remember it back then. Or maybe some things have changed with the way it's put together, or maybe some things have changed with my palate or my whiskey journey or whatever you call it. I'm really interested to find out where I'm at and where it's at. So Four Roses Small Batch Select, it comes to us from our good friends at Kirin Holdings Group out of Japan. They've owned Four Roses now since they bought it from Diageo back in 2002. The distillery is in Lawrenceburg, Kentucky, and that's good for me because each time we visit the in-laws, we drive right past it. And Wild Turkey, because it's on the other side of the highway. So anyway, I get a good bit of exposure to Four Roses, and it's cool because they have a lot of single barrel stuff that Brent Elliott puts together specifically for the gift shop. You can only get it there from the distillery. So I'm kind of fond of Four Roses for that reason alone. Small Batch Select is widely available, guys. It's not a special release, and I love we can walk into almost any store, whether it be Walmart, Sam's Club, Costco, just about any liquor store, pretty much anywhere has it. You can grab a bottle just about anywhere for around $60. Now, something else I really admire about what Brent Elliott has done here with the Small Batch Select, they actually tell you the age. It's unbelievable, right? It's right on their website. It says it's aged between 6 to 7 years. So that's fantastic. At least we've got a good jumping off point, and I love transparency. So their mash bill. Now, they're also not shy about the mash bill, and it's somewhat complicated. I'm not a PhD. I'm not going into a lesson here on yeast strains and all that jazz. There'll be no science today, kids. But suffice it to say, the mash bill is a blend of 6 of their 10 recipes. They got a lot going on there. This particular Small Batch Select bourbon whiskey has 2 mash bills in it. The first mash bill, if you're into this math and science, it's 75% corn, 20% rye, 5% malted barley. And the second mash bill is 60% corn, so it's low corn, and it's high rye at 35%, 5% malted barley. Today is not the time to do a deep dive into their mash bills. But from my understanding, the way they blended these together should produce a richer, more complex profile and tasting notes. They're going to be a little more profound here than just the regular plain Jane small batch that Four Roses also puts out. And I believe that's in part due to that high rye, both the 20%, which is pretty high, and the 35%. That's at least my idea. Oh, man. Man, I love this part too. It's non-chill filtered. And that's right in my wheelhouse. And the proof point, it comes in at a wonderful 104 proof. Again, loving that. I'd say my favorite range would be around 100 to 115 or maybe 95 to 115-ish. So at any rate, this is kind of right where it should be, at least in my mind. Now, I think I already mentioned the price at $60. So let's crack this open and get to drinking. Huzzah! Now I've got my blind tasting podcast, super duper etched logo rocks glass for tasting today. Giving the Glencairn a rest. Okay, it's in the dishwasher. At any rate, let me swirl it around and see what we got here. I'm going to give it a little nosing. It's got decent legs as I swirl it around in the glass. Getting a kind of a rich, creamy vanilla and a kind of an interesting note, like maybe hay or, okay, more like a sweet grass thing going on here. It's very sweet. I'm also getting lots of fruitiness. Like pear, that wouldn't surprise me. Yep, a little bit of pear here, mixed with some maybe some ripe peaches. It's very, very sweet, very, very pleasant. And there's virtually almost zero alcohol here on the nose at 104 proof. I think it's right about where it should be, actually. Yeah, almost zero. Very, very approachable. It's got just a bit, maybe call it a smidge of soft oakiness in here. Maybe just a little waft of it. Not real strong, though. The strongest notes I'm getting are that creamy vanilla, caramel, that fruitiness, and like a pleasant, like that soft, sweet grass to me. Let me get a sip of this and see what we got. Okay, there's the peppery spice and that oak that you know has got to be in here with that blend of mash bills. It's nice, and it comes along for the ride. Got a beautiful fruity creaminess in here as well. And the mouthfeel, it's terrific. For a 6 to 7 year old whiskey, this mouthfeel's, it's actually a bit better than I'd expect or even remembered. Let me take another sip. Let me move it around in the mouth with that Kentucky chew. I just cannot believe I've waited 5 long years to try this again. So when I picked this up 5 years ago, the bottle lasted, if I remember correctly, the bottle lasted about 2 weeks, and I'm starting to see why. The finish, let me talk a little bit about the finish here. I'm going to get another sip here. Okay, the finish is a mid-range finish. It's kind of like Goldilocks and the Three Bears. It's not too long, and it's not too short. It's just right. And so I was worried about that sweet grassy note on the nose. I am not a fan of pine needles or tree bark or grass in my bourbon, actually, but this is more of a soft, subtle note that works well with everything else that's in here. Clearly that high rye we're dealing with is to blame. Or I guess it's funny to use the word blame, but I'm not mad. But that rye is really checking a box for me here. Let me get one last sip. Layers upon layers here. And if you mix up all these recipes and mash bills, what do you expect? Well, actually, if you're a dumbass mixing this stuff up, could be a disaster. Think a terrible, horrible infinity bottle. But this has all the things, and all the things are playing super well together. It's like Thor and Hulk, really. You know what I'm talking about. If you don't know what I'm talking about, Thor and Hulk, they're both powerful, but they come from very different worlds. But when they work together, you better look out. It finishes nicely. And if I'm not mistaken, I'm getting a bit of warm brown sugar, maybe just a little bit of dark chocolate, just the slightest bit, maybe a hint of clove. I don't mean a rough, harsh clove, but a subtle clove spice that, like I said, it plays well with that creamy, sweet fruitiness that's all mixed up in here. So what's the verdict? Can you pretty much guess my verdict? Do we even need a verdict on this one? Well, I'll have the answer right after the money spot. All right, whiskey freaks, let's be real. This podcast ain't free to make. And my wife, well, she's got questions about where all the money's going. So if you've ever enjoyed an episode here on the Blind Tasting Podcast and thought, man, this guy deserves a drink, well, now here's your chance. Head over to buymeacoffee.com/blindtastingpodcast. Toss a few bucks in the tip jar. It'll keep the podcast rolling, and it helps me prove to my wife that somebody out there thinks this was a good idea. Thanks for the support, whiskey freaks. That's buymeacoffee.com/blindtastingpodcast. Just a buck or two if you love what you're hearing. So appreciated, guys. Cheers to all of you. Now let's get back to the bourbon. So if you listen to the Blind Tasting Podcast, and the Splash and Dash works the same way, we've got 3 verdict options here. Are we going to keep it? Are we going to collect it? Or are we going to cull it? To keep it means to proudly display it in your liquor cabinet or bar. This stuff is great for a pour anytime, but there's no need to stock up on it since it's always available. So collect it. Grab another bottle, or maybe even grab 2 bottles since you find it so damn good. Or it just might not be easy to get your hands on a regular basis. Lastly, cull it. Use it to loosen rusty bolts or sanitize a dirty toilet. In the case of Four Roses Small Batch Select Straight Bourbon Whiskey, I say, keep it. The tasting notes are profound. It's just that simple, or, well, it's that complex, I guess, especially when you're talking about all the yeast and mash bills and all that stuff that's going on here. I think Brent Elliott's got it dialed in. He's hit the mark here big time. Think of it. You mix a bunch of unlikely ingredients together, and it still, well, it makes something amazing. Like, think about mango habanero wings. Who dreamt up that idea? But it works well, even if on first look you might say, yeah, no thanks. So you're saying Stark. It's not a value pour. And I say, it isn't? I mean, you can spend far more than this and not get the consistency. And what I mean by that is the consistency. I remember this actually as good as, probably maybe just a slightly bit better. That's maybe nostalgia. But I remember this the same way as it was 5 years ago when I first had it. So you could spend lots more and not get that consistency and not get the spectrum of tasting notes that you're getting here. Even at $60. It's just worth it, kids. And if you want to impress somebody for their birthday or a special gift, this would do the trick. It looks expensive, it tastes expensive, and like I said, you can find it everywhere. The good folks at Four Roses, I really think they've absolutely knocked this out of the park on both value and quality. And no, they didn't pay me to say that, but if they did, I'd probably be doing the pod from my own private island. Look, I make exactly $0 hairs from this, but I sleep like a baby knowing you're going to be able to walk into the liquor store, you're going to be armed with the knowledge to make a power move. You can grab this bottle confidently, and you'll know when you get home or when you roll up to the party or you hand it off as a gift, you're going to instantly be the MVP. And for $60, that's Hall of Fame level shit. Well, that's all I got for today, Whiskey Freaks. Thanks for listening to the Blind Tasting Podcast, Splash and Dash. I hope you'll come back soon, and don't forget to share, because sharing is caring. Later.